The Miami sun beat down on Wynwood, painting the vibrant murals in strokes of gold and shadow. Hannah Reed, 28, moved between buckets of hydrangeas and snapdragons, her hands stained green from a morning spent coaxing life from delicate stems. Her flower stall, nestled between an artisan coffee shop and a pop-up gallery, was her sanctuary, her battlefield. Every petal sold was a step toward stability, a brick laid for the future she was fiercely building for her son. She wasn't just a florist. She was a sculptor of hope, a protector. The humid air clung to her, a familiar weight, but today an unfamiliar dread hummed beneath her skin. She was arranging a cascade of fiery gladioli when the dread solidified into a sickening lurch. Her ex, Mark, stood at the edge of her stall, his face a mask of manufactured concern that never quite reached his eyes. He wasn't alone. A small crowd of curious onlookers had already gathered, drawn by the sudden tension, by the way Hannah's hands had frozen mid-arrangement. "Hannah, darling," Mark began, his voice carrying far too easily in the open air, "you really need to be more responsible. I tried to tell you, but you just wouldn't listen, would you?" Her stomach clenched. She knew this game. He loved an audience. She tried to project calm, a quiet strength she often had to fake. "Mark, this isn't the place," he scoffed, a theatrical sound that made a few people shift uncomfortably. "Oh, isn't it? When you're racking up debts, when our son's medical bills are through the roof, and you're out here playing with flowers, someone needs to hold you accountable." He gestured vaguely at her overflowing buckets, a sneer twisting his lips. "This isn't a hobby, Hannah. It's a business you're clearly failing at. How are you going to provide for Leo when you can't even manage this?" The words hit her like a physical blow. Not just the accusation of failure, but the deliberate public weaponization of her son's needs. Her face flushed, a burning heat that spread down her neck. She felt every eye on her, every whisper, every judgment. Humiliation, sharp and agonizing, pierced through her carefully constructed calm. Her hands began to tremble, betraying her. She wanted to scream, to defend herself, to explain the late nights, the early mornings, the sacrifices, but the words caught in her throat, choked by shame. He had done it again, stripped her bare in front of strangers. Her breath hitched. She just needed him to leave, needed the earth to swallow her whole. Her world was crumbling again, right here in the bright Miami sun. A dark, sleek sedan, impossibly quiet for its size, glided past the edge of the market. Its tinted windows allowed no view in, but for a split second, as it paused at the intersection, Hannah felt a gaze. A flicker of movement in the passenger seat, a hint of dark eyes, sharp and unyielding, cutting through the chaos of her humiliation. It was only a moment, a phantom sensation, but it was enough to pierce the fog of her despair. The car moved on, disappearing into the traffic, leaving behind only the lingering scent of expensive leather and an unsettling awareness that someone, powerful and unseen, had witnessed her public undoing. She shivered, the humid air suddenly chilling her to the bone. The Wynwood crowd dispersed quickly, leaving Hannah with a silence that screamed louder than Mark's public accusations. Her flower stall, once a vibrant shield, felt like a spotlight. Every petal now seemed to wilt under the weight of his words, of her humiliation. She moved on autopilot, hands shaking as she packed away the unsold blooms, the scent of fresh-cut roses turning bitter in her throat. The thought of facing anyone, of explaining, was unbearable. All she could think of was Leo, her son. How would this latest stunt impact her custody fight? Mark was poison, and he was trying to infect every part of her life, even the pure, innocent world she built around her child. She felt exposed, broken, like a shattered vase, unable to hold the water needed to sustain her own life. The last bucket was loaded into her old rattling van, the sun sinking below the Miami skyline, painting the humid air in bruised purples and oranges. She drove home, the city lights blurring through the unshed tears in her eyes. The small apartment, usually her refuge, felt suffocating. She threw her keys onto the counter, not bothering to turn on the lights, letting the creeping dusk fill the room. She just stood there, leaning against the cool wall, the shame of physical ache in her chest. She was tired, so utterly exhausted from fighting him, from fighting for everything. A soft knock echoed through the quiet apartment. Hannah froze. Mark wouldn't knock. He'd just barge in or call or send another text designed to chip away at her. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She didn't move, didn't breathe, hoping whoever it was would simply leave. The knock came again, firmer this time. Deliberate. A voice, deep and resonant, cut through the door. "Hannah Reed, I know you're in there." It wasn't Mark. The voice was unfamiliar, yet it sent a shiver down her spine, a prickle of recognition from that fleeting glimpse of the dark sedan earlier. She walked to the door, pressing her ear to the wood, her hand hovering over the lock. "Who is it?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Riccardo Bianchi." The name hung in the air, heavy with unspoken authority. "We need to talk." Her breath hitched. She shouldn't open the door. Every instinct screamed danger, but something else, a desperate curiosity, pulled at her. This wasn't the police, wasn't a bill collector. It was something else entirely. Slowly, she unlatched the lock, pulling the door open just a crack. He stood there, framed by the dim hallway light, a silhouette of power, taller than she remembered, impeccably dressed in a dark suit that seemed to absorb the light. His eyes, dark and intense, met hers, unwavering. There was no judgment in them, only a quiet, unnerving assessment. "I saw what happened today," he said, his voice calm, steady, devoid of pity. "Your ex is a problem." Hannah bristled, humiliation flaring anew. "That's none of your business." He took a step closer, not aggressive but utterly commanding. "It is now. I can make it my business, and I can make your problems disappear." His gaze softened, almost imperceptibly, landing on the hand she unconsciously placed over her stomach, a protective gesture. "For you and for your son." Her heart throbbed. "What are you talking about? Who are you?" She gripped the doorframe, ready to slam it shut. "I don't need charity, and I certainly don't need whatever this is." A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips, a dangerous curve. "It's not charity, it's an offer." He paused, his eyes holding hers, the weight of his unspoken power pressing down on her. "Come with me, Hannah. Let me give you and your child the safety you deserve." The words were direct. A statement, not a question. They promised an escape, a sanctuary, but also hinted at a world she couldn't comprehend. She saw the quiet compassion in his eyes, but it was overshadowed by the absolute certainty of a man who was used to making things happen. He didn't ask, he commanded. And somehow, in her lowest moment, the sheer audacity of his offer, the unshakable confidence in his promise of safety, was terrifyingly, undeniably tempting. A dangerous hand, reaching out in the humid Miami night, offering a way out of the darkness. The night air, once a humid comfort, now pressed in on Hannah, thick and suffocating. Riccardo Bianchi stood before her, an immovable shadow against the dim light, his offer still echoing in the small apartment. "Come with me, Hannah. Let me give you and your child the safety you deserve." Safety. It was a word she craved more than anything, a soft bed for her exhausted mind. But it came from this man, this stranger, cloaked in power and an unnerving confidence, a dangerous hand. Her mind raced, a frantic hummingbird trapped in her skull. Stability for Leo, No more public humiliation, no more fear. The allure was a siren song, strong enough to make her chest ache. But the price? The potential loss of herself, her freedom, the very fight she clung to. Aligning with a man who could make problems disappear felt like stepping into a gilded cage. Beautiful, perhaps, but still a cage. Safety? Hannah managed. Her voice a thin thread. She gripped the doorframe, her knuckles white. What kind of safety, and why me? What do you want? His dark eyes held hers, unblinking. The kind that ensures your son sleeps soundly at night, without the shadow of your ex's debts or his malice hanging over him. He took another step, closing the distance, and Hannah felt the sheer weight of his presence. I don't want anything from you, Hannah. I'm offering something to you. Protection. Not as a captor, but as a guardian. The word guardian felt heavy, loaded. It implied a responsibility he was willing to take, but also a control she hadn't asked for. A guardian of what? My life? My choices? A flicker of something, amusement or perhaps a challenge, crossed his face. Of your well-being, of your child's future. My world is structured. There are rules, no drugs, no kids in the game. His voice lowered, a subtle shift in tone that made the hairs on her arms rise. And violence, when necessary, is invisible. It doesn't touch the innocent. Invisible violence. The phrase chilled her. It didn't mean no violence. It meant a kind of violence she wouldn't see, wouldn't be part of, but would undoubtedly be the beneficiary of. He drew a line, a distinct boundary, but that boundary itself was carved into a dark, dangerous landscape. He was telling her he operated in a world where violence was a tool, just one that he kept hidden from view. So, you're a fixer? She whispered, the question tasting like ash. You just make things disappear. He didn't deny it. I ensure order. And your ex is creating disorder that will soon attract the wrong kind of attention, attention you and your son do not deserve. His gaze drifted to a framed photo on her wall, a smiling Leo, clutching his dolphin backpack. The quiet compassion she'd sensed before was there again, a strange warmth in his otherwise formidable presence. What if I don't want your invisible violence? Hannah pressed, her voice gaining strength despite the tremor in her hands. What if I want a clean fight, a legal one? Ricardo's lips thinned. Legal fights are slow, Hannah, and your ex has already escalated beyond the reach of slow solutions. He's crossed lines he shouldn't have. His eyes sharpened, locking onto hers. I can give you the space, the resources to fight legally if you wish, but I will ensure the fight is fair, and that you and your son are safe while you do it. That means I handle the elements that would undermine any legal path. He wasn't proposing a simple escape. He was proposing a strategic alliance, with himself firmly in control of the dangerous variables. His power was immense, undeniable, yet she wouldn't be a pawn. I won't trade one captor for another, she stated, her chin lifting. If I consider this, my son and I will be safe, truly safe. And I will make my own decisions about my life. I won't be owned. A silent beat passed between them. The air thrummed with unspoken challenge. Ricardo studied her, a slow, appraising look that felt like a probe into her very soul. He saw her fear, but also her unwavering resolve. No, he finally said, his voice softer, almost a promise. You won't be owned. You will be protected. You will have choices. But those choices will be made from a position of strength, not desperation. He extended a hand, not to touch her, but as an open gesture. Think about it, Hannah Reed. The sun rises tomorrow. Do you want it to rise on the same fear, the same humiliation, or on the first day of something different? She looked at his hand, then back into his dark, compelling eyes. He was offering a way out, a path to peace for her son. But it was a path lined with shadows, a beautiful, terrifying gold cage, and she, for the first time in a long time, felt a flicker of hope, warring with a profound, unsettling fear. Hannah woke to the unusual silence. 2 full days. Mark hadn't called, hadn't texted, hadn't appeared. The absence of his toxic presence was a relief so profound it felt like a physical weight lifting from her chest. Yet a new tension hummed beneath her skin, the lingering echo of Riccardo Bianchi's offer. "Come with me." It was a dangerous thought, a gilded cage, but the promise of safety for Leo pulsed like a lifeline in her exhausted mind. She was at her flower stall, trying to lose herself in the vibrant chaos of a new morning delivery, when it happened. A sleek, black car, not as overtly luxurious as Riccardo's sedan, but undeniably expensive, pulled up. A uniformed driver emerged, carrying a monstrous bouquet wrapped in delicate paper, almost comically large. "For Hannah Reed," he stated, his voice clipped, professional. Hannah frowned, taking the massive bundle. It was a peony bouquet, a riot of blush pinks and creamy whites, so fresh they must have been cut hours ago. Her breath hitched. These weren't just any peonies. They were the rare, expensive Japanese tree peonies she'd only ever dreamed of working with, the kind she knew only one high-end supplier in Miami carried, a supplier she herself couldn't afford. Tucked into the emerald green stems was a small, elegant card. No name, just a single cursive R. Her heart hammered. He knew. He knew her favorite, her secret longing. He had reached into her world, not with a command, but with a silent, beautiful statement of understanding. It was a quiet compassion, wrapped in a display of undeniable power. He wasn't just offering safety. He was offering a world where her unspoken desires could be met. It was unsettling, yet undeniably seductive. Later that afternoon, as the windward sun began its slow descent, Riccardo appeared. Not in his imposing sedan, but on foot, emerging from the bustling street as if he simply materialized. He wore a dark, open-collared shirt that somehow made him seem less formal, but no less powerful. Leo, released from preschool, was with her, clutching his faded blue dolphin backpack, chattering excitedly about a drawing he'd made. Riccardo's dark eyes found Hannah's, a silent acknowledgement of the peonies, of the unspoken agreement hanging between them. Then, unexpectedly, his gaze dropped to Leo. The boy, oblivious, tugged at Hannah's jeans, showing off a crayon-scribbled shark. "Look, Mama, it's Chompers!" Hannah knelt, forcing a smile, acutely aware of Riccardo's presence. "That's wonderful, honey. So fierce." Riccardo stepped closer, his shadow falling over them. He knelt too, a surprising, almost clumsy movement for such a formidable man. He didn't touch Leo, but his attention was absolute. "Chompers, you say?" His voice was softer than Hannah had ever heard it, a low rumble that didn't frighten Leo. "He looks like a shark who knows what he wants." Leo beamed, pushing the drawing closer. Riccardo took it, his large fingers surprisingly gentle as he examined the crude lines. His eyes, usually so sharp and calculating, held a genuine, unreadable softness as they flickered from the shark to Leo's bright, innocent face, then to the worn dolphin backpack clutched in the boy's hand. It was a side of him Hannah hadn't anticipated, a glimpse into a quiet tenderness that disarmed her completely. Her fiercely protective mother's heart, usually wary, softened just a fraction. "That's a very good shark, Leo," Riccardo said, handing the drawing back. He straightened, his gaze meeting Hannah's over Leo's head. The tenderness was still there, but now it was overlaid with a possessive intensity that made her skin prickle. "He's good with kids," Hannah murmured later, after Leo was distracted by a new friend at the playground nearby. Riccardo just watched Leo, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Children are innocent, they deserve protection." He turned back to Hannah. "Your ex has not contacted you?" Hannah shook her head. "No, nothing. It's unsettling after so long." "Consider it handled." His words were flat, devoid of triumph, yet carried the full weight of his influence. He hadn't explained how, hadn't boasted, he had simply acted. The constant, gnawing anxiety that had become her baseline began to recede, replaced by a strange, dangerous sense of relief. He wasn't just offering to make problems disappear. He was already doing it, subtly, invisibly. He was keeping his promise. And with every quiet act of protection, with every unexpected glimpse of gentleness, Hannah felt herself slipping just a little into the dangerous, comforting orbit of Riccardo Bianchi. The invitation had been more of a quiet summons. "Come see where I work," Riccardo had said, his voice a low thrum over the phone. Hannah, her mind still reeling from the sudden eerie quiet from Mark, found herself agreeing, a strange mix of apprehension and curiosity pulling her. He hadn't asked, he'd stated, and she, for the first time, hadn't resisted. He drove her to Port Miami, the city's skyline gradually giving way to a colossal landscape of steel and sea. Massive cranes, like prehistoric giants, clawed at the humid sky, lifting containers the size of houses with effortless grace. The air thrummed with the low roar of engines, the distant clang of metal, the salty tang of the ocean. This was Riccardo's domain, a world of immense power and precision. "Bianchi Logistics," he stated, gesturing to a vast complex of warehouses and offices, the name emblazoned in stark, modern lettering. "We move the world." Hannah felt a strange awe. This wasn't the shadowy back alley she'd half expected. This was legitimate, immense, global. She saw the efficiency, the security, the sheer scale of operations. Every person they passed, from the gate guard to the forklift operator, greeted Riccardo with a nod of respect, a quiet deference that spoke volumes. He moved through his empire with an innate authority, a silent king surveying his kingdom. "It's impressive," she finally managed, her voice feeling small against the backdrop of the port. He turned to her, his dark eyes reflecting the industrial glitter of the containers. "It's clean, organized, every shipment accounted for, every detail monitored." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the bustling scene. "But even in the cleanest of worlds, there are shadows, and the larger the light, the longer the shadows." She understood. This was his invisible violence. The power he wielded here, the control, could be redirected, twisted, used to make problems disappear in ways she couldn't yet fathom. The contrast was stark, the visible, legitimate empire and the implied, unseen force beneath. She saw the potential for danger, but also the impenetrable shield he could offer. Later, in his sleek, minimalist office overlooking the expanse of the port, the conversation shifted. The air conditioning was crisp, a stark contrast to the humid Miami heat. He offered her coffee, moving with a quiet grace that belied his formidable presence. "You understand now," he began, settling into a chair opposite her. "What I can offer, what kind of protection." Hannah nodded, her throat dry. "And the terms?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. She needed to know the full cost of this dangerous, glittering safety. Riccardo leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his gaze unwavering. "My protection is absolute, for you and Leo. You will live comfortably. You will pursue your business. No one will touch you. No one will threaten you. Your ex will cease to be a problem. Permanently." His voice held no malice, just a cold, decisive certainty that sent a shiver down her spine. "But in my sphere, there are expectations." He observed her closely, searching for any weakness, any hesitation. Hannah met his gaze, refusing to flinch. She needed to show him her strength, her boundaries. You will not actively interfere with my business. You will understand that certain matters are not for your knowledge. Your past connections, especially to your ex, will be severed completely. And you will trust me to handle matters that fall outside the law, without questioning my methods. Her breath hitched, without questioning his methods. That was the real price. To close her eyes, to turn away from the shadows, to allow him to act on her behalf, even if it meant stepping into his world of invisible violence. It was a lot to ask, a profound leap of faith into a moral grey area. "I won't be a prisoner," she said, her voice firm. "I won't be owned. I protect my son, and I will make my own decisions." A slow smile touched his lips, a rare, breathtaking sight that softened the hard lines of his face. "No, you will not be a prisoner. You will be safe. You will be free to live your life, to build your future. But you will be under my protection, and my protection comes with my rules." His eyes, dark as midnight, held hers. "You are strong, Hannah Reed, stronger than you know. That is why I offer you this, not as a burden, but as an alliance." The words resonated deep within her. An alliance, not a rescue, not a cage, but a partnership with a man who could command empires. The danger was palpable, a thrilling undercurrent, but so was the promise of peace. She felt drawn to him, to the quiet power, the unwavering resolve, the strange, almost tender way he spoke of her son. It was a dangerous attraction, a magnetic pull to the very edge of the abyss, but the view from the precipice, for the first time in forever, looked like hope. The quiet had been a dangerous illusion. 2 days of Mark's silence, 2 days of Ricardo's subtle protection, and Hannah had almost started to breathe. She was at her stall, arranging a fresh batch of sunflowers, the vibrant yellow a stark contrast to the churning anxiety in her gut. She should have known it wouldn't last. Mark was a storm, and storms always returned. The text message arrived, a jarring buzz against her hip. It wasn't from Mark, but it was about him. A blurry photo, clearly taken in haste, of a dingy bar. And in the corner, Mark, looking haggard, desperate, talking to 2 men whose faces were obscured, but whose presence radiated menace. The caption beneath the photo was stark. "He's in deep. They're looking for him, and they know he used your address." Hannah's blood ran cold. Who were they? Before she could even process the chilling message, her phone rang. It was Mark. His voice, usually slick and manipulative, was frantic, laced with a fear she'd never heard from. Him. "Hannah, you have to help me. They're going to kill me." Her grip on the phone tightened. "What are you talking about, Mark? Who are they?" "The cartel, the Veracruz cartel. I took some money. It was supposed to be easy. Just a small cut, a little side hustle, you know?" He was babbling, his words tumbling out in a torrent of self-pity and terror. "But they found out, and now they think I have more. They're everywhere, Hannah, I swear to God." Hannah felt the blood drain from her. Efface. The Veracruz cartel. She'd heard the whispers, the chilling stories. These weren't petty thugs, these were monsters. And Mark, in his infinite stupidity, had stolen from them. Her mind flashed back to Ricardo's words. "Your ex is creating disorder that will soon attract the wrong kind of attention." "What does this have to do with me?" she demanded, her voice shaking despite her efforts to control it. "You stay away from me, away from Leo." "No, that's the thing." His voice hitched, a sob. "Escaping him. I told them I invested it in your flower business. I told them you handle all the accounts, that you know where it is. They think you're holding it for me, Hannah. They think you're hiding me." The world tilted. He hadn't just stolen. He had thrown her and Leo directly into the fire. He was using them, her innocent son, as human shields. The public humiliation, the financial struggles, all of it paled in comparison to this. This was a direct, mortal threat. "You did what?" She whispered, the words barely audible. A cold, hard knot formed in her stomach. "You put my son in danger? I didn't mean to. I was desperate. Just tell them you don't know anything, Hannah. Tell them I'm lying. Please, you have to help me." His pleas were pathetic, desperate, but Hannah heard only the echo of his betrayal, the sharp, agonizing realization of Leo's peril. She hung up, her fingers numb. The phone felt like a brick in her hand. The vibrant sunflowers suddenly looked like death. Shrouds. She felt a primal scream rising in her throat, but it died there, choked by pure, unadulterated terror. Later that evening, the reality solidified into a tangible, chilling threat. She was walking home, the humid Miami night pressing in, when she saw it. Not a person, not a car, but a single crimson rose, impaled on the door of her apartment building, its petals already wilting under the oppressive heat. It wasn't one of her roses. It was a specific, dark variety she didn't carry, a bloom that whispered of blood and silent warnings, and beneath it, scrawled roughly on the stucco wall, a single, unmistakable symbol, a stylized serpent, its fangs bared. The mark of the Veracruz cartel. Hannah gasped, clapping a hand over her mouth to stifle the cry. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. They knew where she lived. They weren't just looking for Mark, they were looking for her. Ricardo's warnings, his talk of invisible violence and attracting. The wrong kind of attention reverberated in her mind like a death knell. She was no longer just a struggling florist, no longer just a mother fighting for custody. She was a pawn, caught in a game of life and death, dragged there by her ex's reckless greed. And the cartel had just delivered their first, silent message. Her world, once merely difficult, had become truly, terrifyingly dangerous. The serpent on her wall, the wilting rose, they were burned into Hannah's mind. She hadn't slept, couldn't eat. Every shadow in her small apartment felt like a threat, every creak of the floorboards a warning. She sat huddled on her sofa, Leo's dolphin backpack clutched to her chest, the worn fabric a small comfort against the terror that clawed at her throat. She needed Ricardo. She hated that she needed him, but she did. He arrived without a knock, the door simply opening. He must have used a key, a silent assertion of his presence, his unspoken claim. He took one look at her, at the roar. Fear in her eyes, and the air in the room seemed to crackle. His face, usually a mask of controlled power, tightened. "Veracruz," he stated, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. He didn't ask. He knew. He already knew everything. Hannah just nodded, unable to speak. He knelt before her, his dark eyes intense, searching. "Your ex is a fool, a dead man walking." His hand, large and firm, covered hers, a silent anchor. "This changes things. The legal path you spoke of, it's too slow. The cartel doesn't wait for court dates." Her breath hitched. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," he began, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "I can smother the problem, quickly, permanently." His gaze held hers unwavering. There was no doubt in his eyes, no hesitation. He was offering to make Mark disappear, to sever the threat with ruthless efficiency. A cold dread seeped into Hannah, colder than the fear of the cartel. "No," she whispered, shaking her head vehemently. "No, Ricardo, not like that." He frowned, his jaw tightening. "Hannah, this is not a game for gentle solutions. They will come for Mark, and if he's tied to you, they will come for you and Leo." "I understand the danger," she cried, pulling her hand away, her voice rising with a desperate surge of conviction. "But I won't have blood on my hands. Not for him, not for anyone. I will not compromise everything I stand for, everything I want to teach Leo, just to be safe. I demand a lawful exit, a clean one." His eyes narrowed, a storm brewing in their depths. "Clean? You think a cartel cares about clean? They will carve a path of destruction straight to your door if you give them time." He stood, towering over her, his frustration a palpable force. "This is my world, Hannah. My rules keep my people safe, and my rules sometimes require methods you may not understand." "Then make me understand a legal solution," she shot back, her own anger flaring, fueled by terror and stubborn pride. "Find a way that doesn't involve more violence, or I do it myself." Ricardo stared at her, a muscle ticking in his jaw. He saw her resolve, the unwavering fire in her eyes, even in her fear. The bond between them, fragile and new, stretched taut, threatening to snap under the weight of their clashing ideologies. He wanted to protect her, but she was refusing his most direct, most effective means. She stood too, grabbing her phone. "I'm calling my lawyer. There has to be something. Restraining orders. Protective custody. Something!" She scrolled frantically, her fingers trembling as she dialed. The call went to voicemail. She tried again, then another. No one answered. It was late, but the urgency was immediate, life-threatening. "Hannah," Ricardo said, his voice calmer now, but laced with a chilling certainty. "These are not local thugs. They operate above and below the law. Your lawyer sleeps soundly tonight. The cartel does not." She ignored him, leaving a desperate message, trying another number. Her voice caught, a sob escaping her as she pleaded for help, for answers, for anything that wasn't Ricardo's lethal logic. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening, a stark reminder of her helplessness. The legal system, slow and bureaucratic, felt like a distant, unreachable shore against the swift, brutal tide of the cartel. Ricardo watched her, his expression unreadable. Then he reached into his jacket. Not for a weapon, but for a slim, black leather wallet. He pulled out a card, placing it on the coffee table between them. It was a port access badge, sleek and metallic, with his name and photo. It granted him access to every corner of his vast, powerful domain, a symbol of his absolute control. "This is my world, Hannah," he said, his voice quiet, almost gentle, yet carrying the weight of an empire. "This is where I can make things happen. Your legal options are a whisper against the roar of what's coming. Do you truly believe a piece of paper will stop them?" She looked from the badge, a tangible representation of his formidable power, to her useless phone, then back to the serpent on her wall. He was right. Against a cartel, her legal options were not just slow, they were impotent. She was alone, outmatched, and utterly terrified. The path he offered, dark as it was, might be the only one that led to Leo's safety. And for Leo, she would walk through fire, even if that fire was invisible. The serpent on her wall had been a warning. The days that followed were a suffocating nightmare. Hannah felt eyes on her everywhere, a constant prickle at the back of her neck. Her flower stall, once her haven, now felt like a glass box. Every customer was a potential threat, every parked car outside a silent sentinel. She started taking circuitous routes home, peering into every rearview mirror, her heart leaping at shadows. The phone rang with unknown numbers, brief, silent calls that left her trembling. Someone was watching. Someone was waiting. The cartels. Shadow was long, stretching over every aspect of her life. One evening, after Leo was finally asleep, exhausted from his own unwitting fear, Hannah sat in the dark living room, hugging her knees. The terror was a physical weight, pressing down on her. She couldn't fight this alone. Her lawyer still hadn't returned her frantic calls. The legal system was a snail, the cartel was a viper. A soft click at the door. Ricardo. He entered, a silent, dark presence, his gaze sweeping over her, taking in her pale face, her huddled posture. He didn't speak, but the concern in his eyes was raw, unmasked. "They're watching me," Hannah whispered, her voice hoarse. "I know they are. I see them." Ricardo moved to the sofa, sitting beside her but not touching. He pulled out his phone, a sleek device. "I know," he said, his voice grave. "I've been watching them watching you." He tapped the screen, turning it to her. It was a live feed, grainy but clear. Her flower stall from an angle she recognized, but a camera she'd never known existed. She watched, horrified, as a nondescript sedan parked across the street, its occupants barely visible. Then the feed switched to her apartment building, a man loitering casually, his eyes frequently flicking up to her window. The date and timestamps confirmed it. He'd been there all day. "This camera belongs to a business down the street," Ricardo explained, his voice low. "I have access to many such feeds. They've been consistent. They're not subtle. Because they don't need to be. They want you to know they're there. They want you to feel this." Hannah stared at the screen, her stomach churning. She was exposed, completely vulnerable. Her privacy, her safety, Leo's safety. All of it was a joke. Mark hadn't just stolen from the cartel, he had gift-wrapped her and her son and handed them over. "This is the futility of a slow legal approach, Hannah," Ricardo said, his voice devoid of judgment, only cold, hard fact. "While your lawyer debates paperwork, they will escalate. They will find Mark, and if he has implicated you, they will come for you with extreme prejudice." He put the phone away, his gaze locking with hers. "I can make this stop. I can remove the threat." His words implied a finality, a ruthless efficiency that sent a shiver through her. She knew what he meant. He would smother the problem, as he'd said. It would be swift, brutal, and invisible. "No," Hannah whispered, shaking her head. "I told you, no!" "And violence, not for Mark, not for me." She clutched Leo's backpack tighter, the dolphin's stitched smile a stark contrast to her internal turmoil. "I won't trade my soul for safety, Ricardo. I can't look Leo in the eye if I do." Ricardo studied her, his expression a complex mix of frustration and something else. Respect, perhaps. He saw the fierce, unyielding core of her, the moral compass that even terror couldn't shatter. He knew she wouldn't bend on this. "Your strength is admirable, Hannah," he finally said, his voice softer, "but it puts you in unimaginable danger. You are asking me to fight a war with one hand tied behind my back." He leaned back, his eyes narrowing slightly as if plotting a new strategy. "However, I made you a promise. Safety, for you and Leo, and I will keep it, even if it means adapting my methods." A flicker of hope ignited in Hannah, fragile but real. He was listening. He was considering her impossible demand. "So, what's the plan?" she asked, her voice still trembling, but laced with a new resolve. "How do we get out of this without bloodshed, without becoming like them?" He looked at her, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. "We play their game, but by our rules. We use their greed against them. We find a way to make them whole, but through legal means that expose your ex, not you. It will be complicated. It will require precision, and it will require your full cooperation, Hannah. No more trying to handle things alone. You use my resources, but you will also be a key player." Hannah felt a surge of relief, followed by a jolt of fear. A key player. She was stepping fully into his world, a world of shadows and power, but on her terms. She would fight, not with violence, but with her wits. She looked at Ricardo, at the formidable man who promised safety without asking her to compromise her soul. The reluctant alliance was forged, not with a handshake, but with a shared, desperate understanding. She needed him, his strength, his resources, and for the first time he needed her, her unwavering moral compass, to navigate a path neither of them had anticipated. The cold logic of Ricardo's words, juxtaposed with the terrifying reality on her wall, had finally broken Hannah's resistance. The legal system was a luxury she couldn't afford, not with Leo's life hanging in the balance, but she wouldn't surrender her soul. She would fight, but it would be her fight, on her terms. They sat in Ricardo's office, high above the bustling port, the city lights a distant blur. The air was cool, controlled, a stark contrast to the humid chaos outside. Hannah felt a strange mix of terror and exhilarating purpose. This was it. No more hiding. "We play their game, but by our rules," Ricardo had said, his voice a low, steady current in the quiet room. "Tell me about your ex. His weaknesses, his ego. What makes him tick, Hannah?" She leaned forward, her hands clasped tight on the polished mahogany desk. "Mark is a coward," she began, her voice firm despite the tremor deep inside. "He's greedy, and he thinks he's smarter than everyone else. He loves to be the victim, but he's also desperate for a way out. He'll lie, cheat, steal, whatever he needs to do to save his own skin." Ricardo listened, his dark eyes fixed on her, absorbing every detail. "So we offer him a way out," he mused, a dangerous glint in his gaze. "A false path to salvation that leads to his undoing." "Exactly," Hannah said, a plan beginning to form in her mind, chillingly clear. "He's terrified of the cartel. He's desperate for money, always. What if I tell him I found a way to appease them? A way to get him off the hook, but it requires him to confess everything he stole, and from whom to prove he's cooperating." Ricardo's brow furrowed, a silent assessment. "He would be suspicious. He would think you're setting him up." "He might," Hannah conceded. "But I know how he thinks. I could tell him I'm doing it for Leo, that I need him to clear our names, or the cartel will come for us both. I could say I've found a middleman, someone powerful enough to negotiate with the cartel, but who needs absolute proof of Mark's story before they'll intervene?" She looked at Ricardo, a silent question in her eyes. "Someone like you, but he doesn't need to know it's you." A slow, almost imperceptible smile touched Ricardo's lips. It wasn't amusement, it was recognition. "You understand him well." He leaned back, considering. "A recorded call. He confesses the theft, the cartel's name, the amounts. He believes it's for his own salvation, but it's for his conviction." "Yes," Hannah breathed, a surge of adrenaline coursing through her. "And he'll do it. He'll think he's manipulating me, manipulating the middleman. He'll think he's winning." "It's a delicate dance," Ricardo observed, his eyes sharp. "He must believe you are truly on his side, desperate to save your son, even if it means helping him." "He knows I'd do anything for Leo," Hannah stated, her voice hardening. "He weaponizes it. I'll use it back against him." Ricardo nodded, a flicker of admiration in his gaze. "Your insight into his psychology is invaluable. My resources will set the stage. A secure, untraceable line for the call. Digital evidence of the cartel's involvement for our lawyers. We will give him just enough rope to hang himself while keeping you and Leo completely safe." Hannah felt a strange empowerment, a potent mix of fear and resolve. She was no longer just a victim, she was an architect. But the shadow of his invisible violence still loomed. "Ricardo," she said, meeting his gaze directly, "my condition still stands. No violence, no erasing him. This has to be a lawful exit. He needs to face justice in a courtroom, not disappear into your shadows. His expression became unreadable, a muscle ticking in his jaw. She knew this went against his every instinct, his very code of operation. He was a man who preferred clean, decisive solutions, often brutal ones. The silence stretched, taut and heavy. "You ask a great deal, Hannah Reed," he finally said, his voice low, a hint of steel beneath the calm. "To tie my hands when the enemy has none." He looked away, out at the glittering city, then back at her, his eyes holding hers with an intense, unwavering focus. "But I gave you my word. Safety for you and Leo. On your terms, as much as possible." He paused, then added, "I will adhere to your condition. No violence against him, but you must trust me completely to manage the consequences, to ensure the cartel is appeased, without bloodshed, and without their gaze ever falling on you again." It was a profound act of trust, a dangerous pact. She was asking him to bend his world for her, to operate in a way that defied his nature. And he was agreeing. A fragile yet powerful bond formed between them, forged in the crucible of shared danger and opposing moralities. He trusted her intelligence to trap her ex. She trusted his restraint to honor her demand for a clean justice. It was an alliance neither of them had anticipated, and it would either save them both or shatter them completely. The plan was a living, breathing thing, evolving with every detail Hannah and Ricardo hammered out. She spent hours replaying conversations with Mark, dissecting his arrogance, his blind spots, learning to see him not as her past, but as a target. Ricardo's legal team, a quiet network of sharp minds, was already laying the groundwork, preparing the labyrinthine paperwork for the cartel's repayment plan. Hannah felt a strange, cold calm settling over her. This was her agency, her fight, and for the first time, she felt like she had a weapon. Then the mail arrived. Not a threatening serpent, but something far more insidious. A thick envelope from Mark's lawyer, official and sterile. Inside were the latest custody papers, bristling with accusations. Hannah's stomach clenched as she read, her blood turning to ice. Mark wasn't just trying to paint her as unstable, he was weaponizing Leo's health. The documents detailed every medical bill, every therapy session, every specialized care cost for Leo, highlighting the astronomical sums. Mark's lawyer argued that Hannah, as a struggling florist, was clearly incapable of providing the necessary financial support for their son's extensive medical needs. He then presented his own, heavily doctored, financial statements, claiming he was the stable parent, the one who could secure Leo's future. It was a vicious, calculated blow, designed to hit her where she was most vulnerable, using her son's very illness against her. Hannah stared at the pages, her vision blurring. They were all there, the bills she sometimes felt choked by, the therapy that was Leo's lifeline. But Mark had no idea how she was managing. She scrimped, she saved, she worked until her fingers ached. But somehow the most critical bills were always paid, often by an anonymous fund that mysteriously replenished itself. She had always attributed it to a miracle, a hidden charity, afraid to look too closely lest it disappear. Her breath hitched, a wave of despair and fury washing over her. How dare he? How dare he use Leo's needs, her unwavering dedication, to twist the knife? She crumpled the papers, a guttural sound escaping her throat. This wasn't just about winning custody. It was about stripping her of her dignity, of her worth as a mother. This was a new low, even for Mark. The door to her apartment opened, silent as ever. Ricardo. He took in the crumpled papers, the raw, visceral pain on her face. His dark eyes narrowed, instantly assessing the situation. "What is it?" His voice was low, dangerous. Hannah didn't speak, just pointed a shaking finger at the scattered documents. He moved swiftly, picking up a page, his gaze sweeping over the financial figures, the cruel accusations. His jaw tightened, a muscle ticking violently. "He's using Leo's bills," she finally managed, her voice thick with unshed tears. "He's saying I can't afford his therapy, that I'm an unfit mother." Ricardo's eyes, usually so controlled, flashed with an icy fury. This wasn't a cartel threat, but it was an attack on something equally sacred: innocence and a mother's love. He picked up another page, scanning the donor information section for Leo's therapy fund. His expression shifted, softening almost, imperceptibly, then hardening with a new resolve. "He's wrong," Ricardo stated, his voice quiet, almost a whisper against the rising storm in Hannah's heart. "You are an exceptional mother, and Leo's therapy has always been paid for." Hannah scoffed, a bitter laugh. "I know, but how? I've been so grateful, but I've never known who—" Ricardo looked at her, his gaze intense, unwavering. "It was me, Hannah." The world seemed to tilt. The crumpled papers, the accusations, the very air in the room all faded into insignificance. "What?" she whispered, the single word barely audible. "The anonymous donor," he clarified, his voice calm but with an underlying current of vulnerability she'd never heard before. "It was me. I've been ensuring Leo's therapy program continued since the beginning." Hannah stared at him, her mind reeling. The man who wielded invisible violence, who navigated a world of shadows and power, was also the quiet, anonymous hand that had kept her son's most vital care alive. The monster had a heart, a deeply hidden, fiercely protective heart. The peony bouquet, the gentle interaction with Leo, the promise of safety. It all clicked into place, forming a complete, breathtaking picture. Her complex feelings for him deepened, twisting into something profound and terrifyingly beautiful. He hadn't revealed it to impress her, only because Mark's malice had forced his hand. A wave of emotion, so potent it stole her breath, washed over her. Gratitude, overwhelming and raw, mixed with a shocking tenderness. This wasn't just protection, it was care, unconditional and deeply personal. It affirmed his goodness beneath the dangerous facade, solidified her belief that he operated by a code, even if it was a dark one. Her own resolve, already burning, now flared into an inferno. Mark hadn't just threatened her, he had threatened the quiet, compassionate secret of the man who had helped her son. He had weaponized Leo's future, and for that he would pay, not with blood, not with violence, but with the full unyielding force of the legal trap they had so carefully designed. She would ensure he faced justice, and she would do it with Ricardo by her side, not as her rescuer, but as her formidable, unexpected ally. The revelation still hummed in the air between them, a powerful, unspoken current. Ricardo, the man of shadows and invisible violence, was also the quiet hand that had ensured Leo's future. Hannah looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw not just a formidable boss, but a complex man capable of profound, hidden compassion. It didn't erase the danger, but it redefined it. It made her trust him in a way she never thought possible, not with her life, but with her son's. And for Mark's betrayal, for weaponizing her child's health, Hannah felt a cold, sharp rage ignite. The plan, once a terrifying possibility, now became a meticulous, urgent blueprint. They sat for hours in Ricardo's silent office, the city lights a blur. Below, dissecting every word, every nuance. Hannah practiced her lines, the script she would use to lure Mark into his own trap. She had to sound desperate, broken, yet convincing. She had to tap into every manipulative trick Mark had ever used on her, twisting them back against him. "You'll tell him you found a way," Ricardo explained, his voice low and steady as he outlined the technicalities. "A secret fund, a powerful contact who can appease the cartel. But this contact needs absolute, undeniable proof of his cooperation, a full confession of what he stole, from whom, and where the money went." He placed a sleek, tiny recording device on the desk. "This will capture every word. It will be encrypted, untraceable to you." Hannah's fingers trembled as she picked up the device, cold and small in her palm. It felt like a weapon. "He'll think he's feeding me a line," she murmured, picturing Mark's smug, self-satisfied smirk. "He'll think he's winning." "Precisely," Ricardo affirmed. "His arrogance is his greatest weakness. He will believe he is outsmarting everyone." Meanwhile, Ricardo's legal team was already a silent, efficient machine. Hannah had seen the emails, the detailed spreadsheets. They were building an audited repayment plan for the cartel, a mountain of financial data meticulously compiled from Mark's anticipated seized assets. Every penny he'd stolen, every illicit gain, would be traced, accounted for, and promised back. It was a parallel path to justice, ensuring the cartel was satisfied without a drop of blood, while Mark faced the full, legal consequences of his actions. Her own lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman, was equally busy. Hannah had met with her that morning, the custody papers spread across the polished table. The lawyer's grim determination matched Hannah's own. With Ricardo's anonymous financial support for Leo now revealed, and Mark's blatant attempt to weaponize Leo's health exposed, Hannah's case for full custody was stronger than ever. The papers, once a source of dread, now felt like a shield, a tangible promise of a stable, secure future for her son, free from Mark's poisonous influence. But as the final details of the plan solidified, a knot of apprehension tightened in Hannah's chest. The confession, the legal trap, it was all moving towards a very real, very final end for Mark. She looked at Ricardo, his face impassive, his dark eyes like pools of unspoken power. "Ricardo," she began, her voice firm. "I need to be clear. Again, no violence, no erasing him. He will go to prison. He will face the law, but he will not disappear into your shadows. I won't allow it." His jaw tightened, a muscle ticking violently in his cheek. She knew this went against every fiber of his being, every instinct honed in his dangerous world. He was a man who preferred clean, decisive, often brutal solutions. He preferred control, and her demand was a direct challenge to that control. The silence stretched, heavy and taut. "Hannah," he said, his voice a low growl, "you are asking me to fight a viper with a feather. The cartel operates outside the law. They do not care for your clean exit." "Then make them care," she shot back, her gaze unwavering. "You promised me safety on my terms. This is my term. I will not have blood on my hands for Mark. For Leo, I will fight with everything I have, but I will not become like them." He stared at her, his eyes searching, assessing, until the storm in them finally seemed to recede, replaced by a reluctant, almost pained acceptance. He saw the unwavering steel in her, the moral compass that would not bend even for survival. "Very well," he finally conceded, the words heavy with effort. "No violence. He will be delivered to the authorities, but you must trust me completely, Hannah, to manage the fallout, to ensure the cartel is satisfied without their shadow ever touching you or Leo again. That is my responsibility, and I will execute it within your parameters." It was a profound concession, a dangerous pact. He was bending his world for her, honoring her impossible demand. And in that moment, as he met her gaze, his dark eyes holding hers with a mixture of frustration and fierce respect, Hannah knew, with a terrifying certainty, that her trust in him was absolute. The countdown had begun. The humid Miami night pressed in, thick and heavy, but inside Ricardo's apartment the air was cool, almost clinical. Hannah sat on the edge of a sleek leather sofa, the digital clock on the wall ticking relentlessly towards morning. It was the eve of reckoning, the final hours before they put their plan into motion, and the tension in the room was a living, breathing thing, wrapping around her like a suffocating blanket. Every nerve ending felt raw, exposed. She was terrified, a cold knot of dread twisting in her stomach, but beneath it a fierce, unyielding resolve burned, for Leo, for herself. Ricardo stood by the panoramic window, his back to the city lights, a dark, imposing silhouette. He had been quiet for a long time, lost in his own thoughts, and Hannah knew he was running through every contingency, every variable. He was a general preparing for battle, and she was his most vital, most vulnerable soldier. He turned, his dark eyes finding hers across the dim room. "Everything is in place, Hannah," he said, his voice low and steady. "The recording device is tested. The secure line is ready. My legal team is on standby. Awaiting your signal. The moment Mark confesses, the wheels will turn. Quickly." He paused, stepping closer, his presence commanding yet not overwhelming. "This will not be easy. He will try to manipulate you, to scare you, to break you. He will say anything to save himself, but you must hold firm. You must remember why you are doing this." Hannah swallowed, her throat dry. "I know," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. "For Leo. To be free of him, truly free." Ricardo nodded, a flicker of approval in his gaze. "The risks are still present. Mark is unpredictable, and while we have shielded you from the cartel's direct gaze, until he is fully implicated, until the repayment plan is secured, there is always a shadow." He watched her closely, assessing her strength, her fear. "Are you certain, Hannah? There is still time to adjust." She met his gaze, unwavering. "I'm certain. This is the only way, my way." Her chin lifted, a subtle defiance against the fear that still gnawed at her. She thought of the custody papers, of Mark's cruel attempt to use Leo's illness against her. She thought of Ricardo's quiet, anonymous generosity. It solidified her resolve. "And my condition," she added, her voice firm, "still stands. No violence. He goes to prison. He faces the law. No disappearing. No erasing." A muscle in Ricardo's jaw tightened. A brief, almost imperceptible tension. He took another step, closing the distance between them until he stood directly in front of her. His hands, large and strong, gently cupped her face, his thumbs brushing lightly over her cheekbones. His touch was unexpected, a jolt of warmth that cut through the cold fear. "You are a force, Hannah Reed," he murmured, his voice rougher now, filled with an emotion she couldn't quite decipher. "You walk into the fire, demanding it not burn you, and you demand I walk beside you, bound by your impossible rules." His eyes, usually so guarded, held a raw vulnerability she'd never seen before, a quiet acceptance of her moral stand. "Very well, he will face the law, as you wish." He leaned closer, his gaze dropping to her lips, then returning to her eyes. The air between them crackled with unspoken words, with the weight of shared danger and a burgeoning, dangerous intimacy. She could feel the heat radiating from him, the subtle scent of expensive cologne, of something primal and powerful. Her breath hitched. The world outside, the cartel, Mark, the entire terrifying plan, faded into a distant hum. There was only Ricardo, his eyes dark and intense, and the terrifying, exhilarating knowledge that he saw her, truly saw her, in a way no one ever had. "I will be with you, Hannah," he promised, his voice a low thrum that vibrated through her. "Every step. You are not alone." His thumbs stroked her cheeks again, a silent comfort, a profound connection. She leaned into his touch, finding a strange, unexpected solace in his strength, in his unwavering presence. The bond between them, forged in fear and defiance, felt unbreakable. The storm was coming, but for the first time, Hannah felt ready to face it, knowing Ricardo, the man of shadows and hidden compassion, would be by her side. The cool, sterile air of the private hospital pediatric wing did little to calm Hannah's racing heart. It was late, the hallways hushed, the only sounds the distant hum of machinery and the soft rhythmic beeping from unseen rooms. She had just left Leo's bedside, pressing a kiss to his sleeping forehead, the warmth of his small body a vivid reminder of everything she was fighting for. Now she sat alone in a quiet, dimly lit waiting area. The small recording device Ricardo had given her a cold, hard weight in her palm. It was time. Her fingers trembled as she dialed Mark's number. He answered on the second ring, his voice tight with desperation. "Hannah, did you talk to him? Did he say he'd help? They're everywhere, Hannah. I swear to God, they're going to kill me." Hannah took a deep, steadying breath, summoning every ounce of the performance they'd rehearsed. "Mark, calm down. Yes, I spoke to him. He's listening, but he won't do anything unless you're completely honest. He says he can't help you if you're holding anything back." She forced a note of frantic urgency into her voice, a desperate plea for her son's safety. "He said you need to tell him everything, every detail. Otherwise he can't make a deal with them, and then we're all dead. Me and Leo too." "A deal?" Mark repeated, a flicker of hope, and his usual self-serving cunning creeping into his tone. "What kind of deal? He can really make them go away?" "He says he can appease them," Hannah whispered, leaning forward, her voice low and conspiratorial, as if she were risking everything to tell him this. "But he needs to know exactly what you took, and from whom. He needs to know everything to prove you're cooperating. He says he needs to know you're not hiding anything else. He won't trust me unless you're completely upfront with him." A beat of silence stretched, filled with the frantic drumming of her heart. She could almost hear the gears turning in Mark's head, his ego battling his fear. He thought he was smarter than everyone. He would think he could spin this, make it sound better than it was, but he would confess. He had to. "Okay," Mark finally said, a false bravado creeping into his voice. "Okay, so what do I tell him? You're recording this, right? For him?" Hannah's blood ran cold. He was falling for it. "Yes, Mark. It's for him. Just tell the truth, everything. Don't leave anything out, or he won't help you. He said he has connections. He'll know if you're lying." Right," he muttered, already caught in his own web. "So, the Vera Cruz cartel. Yeah, I took some money from them. Not much, just a couple of shipments. It was supposed to be easy. I was just moving some cash, for a friend, and I saw an opportunity. A few $100,000. Maybe. It was from their offshore accounts, the ones they use for the legitimate businesses. I thought they wouldn't notice a small cut." He chuckled, a nervous, self-congratulatory sound that made Hannah's stomach churn. "I mean, who misses a few $100,000 when you're moving millions, right?" Hannah listened, every word a fresh stab of disgust and a surge of terrifying triumph. He was confessing. He was implicating himself, solidifying the cartel's involvement. The tiny device in her hand glowed a steady, silent red. "And where did you put it, Mark?" she pressed, her voice unwavering, pushing him deeper. "The contact needs to know where the money is, so he can retrieve it for them." He hesitated, a moment of doubt, before his desperation won out. "Some of it went into those fake business accounts, the ones I set up under your name. Just small amounts, to make it look like you were actually doing something." He laughed again, a harsh, humorless sound. And the rest? Well, the rest I spent. A new car, some gambling debts, you know how it is. But I can get it back, Hannah, I swear. If this guy helps me, I'll find a way. Her hand clenched around the recorder. He'd just admitted to theft, to laundering, to using her name, and to his direct involvement with the cartel. He'd sealed his own fate. The confession, raw and unprompted, flowed from him, a torrent of self-pity and entitlement, all recorded, all undeniable. The trap was sprung. Hannah felt a cold, exhilarating surge of victory, even as the terror of what he'd truly done solidified in her mind. It was over. Mark's voice, a sickening mix of arrogance and desperation, droned on, detailing illicit accounts, shell companies, and the exact sums he'd siphoned from the cartel. He even bragged about how clever he'd been, how he'd fooled them all, how he'd used Hannah's business as a decoy. Each word was a fresh insult, a new layer of betrayal, but Hannah held firm, her gaze fixed on a distant, silent monitor displaying Leo's vitals in the pediatric wing. The tiny recording device in her hand glowed, capturing every damning syllable. He was confessing. He was sealing his own fate. "I just need this guy to make them go away, Hannah," Mark finally pleaded, his voice cracking with relief, convinced he'd just secured his freedom. "You tell him everything, okay? Tell him I'm good for it. I'm cooperating." Hannah felt a cold, hard click in her heart. "I will, Mark," she said, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. "He knows everything now." She ended the call, the silence of the hospital hallway rushing back in. The recorder clicked off, the red light vanishing. It was done. The evidence was irrefutable. She had trapped him, not with violence, but with his own greed and ego. A wave of exhaustion washed over her, mingled with a fierce, quiet triumph. Just as she sagged against the cool wall, her phone vibrated. Ricardo. His name flashed on the screen, a beacon in the storm. "It's done," she whispered, her voice rough. "He confessed everything. The cartel, the money, my name. It's all there." "Excellent," Ricardo's voice rumbled, calm and steady, but with an underlying current of satisfaction. "My lawyers are making their move now. The audited repayment plan is being delivered to their Miami contacts. Every penny will be accounted for, traced to his seized assets. The cartel will be made whole, without bloodshed, and without ever looking your way again." Hannah closed her eyes, a profound sense of relief washing over her. He had done it. He had honored her terms. He had navigated the impossible, finding a clean path through the shadows. The legal system, slow as it was, would now take over. Mark would face the consequences, not disappear into the void. "And Mark?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly, not with pity, but with a finality she needed to hear. "His confession, along with the evidence we've amassed, is being delivered to the authorities as we speak," Ricardo stated, his voice devoid of emotion. "He will be arrested before dawn. Charges for theft, money laundering, and his association with the cartel will ensure he spends a very long time in prison." Hannah felt a surge of cold, exhilarating victory. Justice her way. It wasn't clean, not truly, because she'd had to stoop to Mark's level of manipulation, but it was lawful. It was above ground. "But Hannah," Ricardo continued, his voice dropping, a dangerous undertone that made her heart impound anew. "There is still one more option. One final cleanup. He could simply disappear. No trial, no mess, no chance of him ever hurting you or Leo again. A complete erasure." Her breath hitched. The quiet menace in his words was chilling, a stark reminder of the true power he wielded, the world he inhabited. He was offering her the ultimate solution from his dangerous arsenal, a way to permanently sever Mark from their lives, without a trace. It was tempting, undeniably so, to simply wish Mark out of existence to guarantee Leo's absolute safety forever. But she remembered her promise to herself, her unwavering moral compass. She remembered Leo, sleeping soundly just rooms away, innocent and pure. She remembered her own fight for dignity, her refusal to be defined by Mark's darkness. "No," she said, her voice clear and strong, unwavering. "No, Ricardo. He faces the law. He goes to prison. He will pay for what he's done, but through justice, not through your shadows. I choose a lawful exit. I choose my own way." A beat of silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken power and her defiant resolve. She waited, her heart hammering for his reaction. Would he be angry? Would he override her? "As you wish, Hannah Reed," he finally said, his voice quiet, almost a sigh but laced with a profound respect. "Justice your way. It will be done." His acceptance was a silent affirmation of her strength, her agency. She had stared into the abyss of his world, wrestled with the darkness, and emerged with her soul intact. She had chosen her path, and he, the man of invisible violence, had chosen to walk it with her, on her terms. The humid night still pressed in, but for the first time Hannah felt truly free. The Miami dawn, usually a riot of gold and rose, broke pale and weary over the city. Hannah watched it from Ricardo's apartment, the glass walls making her feel both exposed and untouchable. The exhaustion that had settled deep in her bones. After the call with Mark was profound, but beneath it a strange, exhilarating lightness bloomed. Mark was gone. Ricardo had confirmed it hours ago, his voice calm and steady over the phone. Mark was in custody, facing a mountain of charges, his own recorded words cementing his fate. The cartel, appeased by Ricardo's swift, precise legal maneuvers and the audited repayment plan, had retreated, their shadow lifting from Hannah's life like a bad dream. Leo was safe. She was safe. The immediate, terrifying conflict was resolved, a clean, sharp cut. She turned from the window, finding Ricardo already watching her from the archway leading to the living area. He wore a dark, open shirt, his tie loosened, a rare glimpse of him unburdened by the full weight of his authority. His dark eyes held hers, searching, understanding. "It's over," she whispered, the words tasting like freedom. He nodded, a silent acknowledgement. "He will not bother you again, or Leo." Hannah felt a sudden, overwhelming wave of emotion. The terror, the humiliation, the relentless fight, it was finally behind her. And it was because of him. The man who bent his dangerous world to her impossible rules. The man who had been the anonymous hand ensuring Leo's therapy, a quiet compassion hidden beneath a storm of power. She walked towards him, her steps hesitant. "Ricardo," she began, her voice thick. "Thank you. For everything, for keeping your word, for Leo." Her eyes burned with unshed tears. "You didn't have to. You could have done it your way." A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. "I gave you my word, Hannah, and you, in turn, showed me a strength I rarely encounter." He reached out, his hand gently cupping her jaw, his thumb brushing over her cheek. The touch was electric, a jolt of warmth that spread through her, chasing away the last vestiges of cold fear. "You forced me to find a different path, a path I hadn't considered." His words resonated deep within her. This wasn't just about being rescued. This was about choice, her choice. She had insisted on her integrity, on a lawful exit, and he had honored it, even when it went against his very nature. He had shown her the depths of his compassion, the unwavering focus of his protection. He had seen her, truly seen her, not as a victim to be saved, but as a woman to be respected. Hannah leaned into his touch, her gaze locking with his. the whirlwind of events, his dangerous world, his quiet generosity. She had processed it all, and she knew. She wasn't rejecting him, wasn't running from the shadows he cast. She was choosing to step into them, on her own terms. "What now?" she asked, her voice soft, laden with unspoken questions about their future. Ricardo's eyes were intense, his thumb still caressing her cheek. "Now you breathe, Hannah Reed. You build your life. You secure Leo's future." He paused, his gaze dropping to her lips, then rising back to her eyes. "And if you choose, you build it. With me, not as a hostage, not as a possession, but as an equal, with your integrity intact, your boundaries respected, your choices yours alone." It wasn't a question, but an invitation, an offer of a new beginning, forged in fire and quiet understanding. It was terrifying, undeniably so, to intertwine her clean, bright world with his shadowed, powerful one, but it was also undeniably, thrillingly right. For the first time in a long time, Hannah felt a fierce, unwavering hope. This wasn't about him saving her. It was about choosing to build something new, together with her dignity, her agency, and her fierce mother's heart leading the way. Her journey of survival had ended. Her journey of choice had just begun. The gavel cracked, a sound that echoed not just in the hushed courtroom, but deep within Hannah's very soul, shattering the last chains of fear. "Full custody is granted to Ms. Hannah Reed." The words, clear and definitive, hung in the air, a benediction. Hannah felt the sudden, overwhelming rush of tears, hot and stinging, but this time they were tears of pure, unadulterated relief. Leo. Her son was truly safe. The fight was over. Mark, a pathetic, defeated figure even in his clean prison jumpsuit, glared from across the room. But his malice held no power over her now. It was done. Months later, the vibrant aroma of fresh-cut flowers filled the air, mingling with the scent of new paint and polished wood. Hannah stood amidst a riot of color in her new studio. Reed and bloom nestled on a sun-drenched corner in Winwood. It wasn't just a shop, it was a cathedral of her dreams, built by hands that once trembled with fear, now steady with purpose. Peonies, her beloved expensive Japanese tree peonies, bloomed in exquisite arrangements, their delicate petals a testament to the quiet strength she had found. Ricardo had sponsored it, not as a handout, but as an investment, a tangible manifestation of her independence. He called it philanthropy, but Hannah knew it was his way of honoring her spirit, her refusal to be broken. Leo, his dolphin backpack slung over his shoulder, burst through the door, giggling, his small hand wrapped around Ricardo's large one. He was thriving, his laughter ringing freely, unburdened by the shadows of the past. Ricardo, dressed in a casual linen shirt, smiled at her, a rare, breathtaking sight that softened the hard lines of his face. He moved through her studio, a silent guardian, his presence commanding, yet somehow seamlessly fitting into her bright, floral world. "Business is good, Kara," he murmured, his gaze sweeping over the bustling shop. Hannah met his eyes, a warmth blooming in her chest that had nothing to do with the Miami heat. "Better than good, and it's all mine." Her voice held a quiet, fierce pride. He nodded, a silent acknowledgement of her unwavering agency. Their relationship, unconventional and fiercely private, had found its own rhythm. He was her protector, her confidant, the unexpected compass in her new, extraordinary life. But it was a relationship built on her terms, a testament to her strength. Tucked away in her wallet, a small, elegant card, not unlike the one that had come with the first peony bouquet, was their pact. It wasn't a contract, but a single handwritten sentence: "My finances remain mine." Ricardo had drafted it, surprising her with its simplicity, its profound respect for her autonomy. It was his promise, written in ink, that her independence, her dignity, would never be compromised. It was the foundation of their future, a testament to a love that understood the power of boundaries. Later, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery oranges and soft purples, Hannah watched Leo chase after a stray butterfly in the courtyard of her studio. Ricardo stood beside her, his hand finding hers, a silent, comforting weight. His thumb brushed over her knuckles, a gentle, possessive touch. "He's happy," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "He is," Ricardo agreed, his gaze fixed on Leo, a profound tenderness in his dark eyes. "And so are you." She leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him. The past was a distant echo, the shadows banished by her own unwavering light, and by the unexpected strength of the man who walked beside her. This wasn't a gilded cage, it was a garden she was building, one petal, one pact, one precious, fearless moment at a time. Her story wasn't about being rescued. It was about choosing her own path, her own power, and her own beautifully unconventional love. If you enjoyed the video, tell us where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel to keep up with our content.